This is a little demonstration about the different plastering techniques that we have been doing and we're going to use. You're probably wondering what all these different things are in front of you. The next step is probably to talk about the lime render or lime plaster. Plaster and render are basically the same thing. Plastering you do inside, rendering you do outside. And rendering is usually made to be weatherproof. So lime render, basically lime is what people used to use for mortar before cement became possible. And lime comes from limestone. You basically burn limestone and it becomes calcium oxide, and then you add water to it, which is what we're going to do now, and it becomes calcium hydroxide. The art of lime plastering is still has lots of fans worldwide, and you'll find online a load of websites dedicated to just working with lime plaster, and there are millions of different things you can do with it and ways of preparing it. This is about as simple as it gets with just lime and sand, and this is how most plasters are prepared. It's just a simple mixture of lime and sand. In the States you can, and here indeed, you can get what's known as builder's lime, which is basically that the white stuff. That's the direct product of the burning of the limestone. That's the calcium oxide, and then you add to it a little bit of water, but not too much, and it becomes this powder. And that is known as, here it's called calcite. It's basically slaked lime, and it's a powder, and you can just add water to that and a bit of sand and put that on your walls, and you've got yourself a basic plaster. This one that we're going to be doing, we want it to be a little bit tougher than that, because the lime plaster will eventually crack and break down if it gets wetted a lot. So with this one we're going to add a binder, which is a sort of glue, and we're going to be using this stuff, prickly pear cactus, or it's also known as nopal. It is actually edible. You could cook that and put it in your soup. Put it in your soup and then cook it. And it's fruit as well. It's the prickly pear fruit. The prickly pear. So what that does is you ferment it, and a week after you've started the fermentation process, which I'll show you now, you get this gooey paste, which you can then add to this plaster, and that makes it tougher. You can make it tougher still by adding horse poop. You can also add cow poop as well, cow manure, horse manure I should say. So what we're going to see now is the slaking process. Ideally what you want to do is you want to make this 3 months ahead of time. If you can't do it 3 months ahead of time, at least a week. So we're just making a small amount now because I haven't coordinated ourselves ready to be plastering that within 1 week. And we'll be making a large batch of this early next week, and then what we'll do is, once it's mixed, and you'll see how he does that, we're going to cover it in plastic, and that stops it from carbonating further. It will actually absorb oxygen from the atmosphere, and it'll become something else which you don't want, and it loses its all its qualities, of which it needs to be a plaster. What the Romans used to do is they dig huge pits in the ground and they'd bury it for 3 years, and then it was really great plaster, and they'd use that for building their aqueducts and buildings. And this is what before the 19th century, before the 20th century, this is what most houses were built with in Europe and the United States. It's what they use for putting stonework together. In China they also used a rice version. But the wonderful thing about this is that lime is available almost everywhere in the world. It's really cheap. It takes quite a lot of heat and energy to do it, so it's has quite a heavy carbon footprint, but nonetheless it is abundant and cheap, and so it's very good for natural building techniques. Cement is like this, but there's another step further, and it takes even more energy. That's the real downside to cement, although it's a wonderful product. It's more expensive, and it also has certain disadvantages. When it's hard, it's brittle, and for example with earthen plasters, you can't use cement. It won't stick. nearly as well. Some people put a little bit of cement to this mix and that will work, but I recommend avoiding cement if you're doing earthen plaster work, because the cement is more rigid. This will actually absorb moisture and release it a little bit more than cement. It is nonetheless, once you've mixed it with the nopal, the prickly pear juice, it will form a hard weatherproof barrier, and it may need occasional repairs, but we're going to protect the bottom of that wall from, which is a big problem in this country. You can probably see, just look along the side of this wall, they don't have very long eaves, so all the rain that comes down there hits that and splatters over there. You've got the same along here, and you see a lot of damage on houses, especially low raindrops, all along the bottom of the houses, and that's usually where they fail. So we're going to protect that by putting this lime plaster on it, with the prickly pear cactus juice and a bit of horsefruit in there as well. So it's basically 4 ingredients. You've got the sand, you've got the lime, which we're going to slake or hydrate, as it's called, which is adding water to it. It's fun to watch as well. You'll see it releases a lot of heat, and as it absorbs the water, and that runs. It's an exothermic chemical reaction. So we're going to run that along both sides of our new wall that we've just done, directly on top of the layer that we've just put on. In order to help it stick to that, what we need to do is wait that till it gets dry. In this climate, it depends on the climate. In a dry climate, you might need to do it the next day. In this climate, it's still quite humid, and it'll probably take 3 or 4 days until it gets to its sort of leather dry. Not completely dry, but a little bit dry and a little bit hard to the touch. Then what you do is you take a sponge and you just wash it, and that reveals all the bits of sand that are in that mix, and that gives it something to bind to. It needs a bit of a scratch. You can also scrape it and scratch it. That gives it more surface to. But on the final coat, you want it to be quite fine. So we're just going to use a sponge. So next Tuesday, we're going to come back, and with a sponge, we're just going to wash that wall, and we're going to apply some of this plaster below. We're going to do this about a week later, so it may be a little bit dry. It's probably not a big problem because it's so humid, it's drying at a very slow rate. And the same, we're also going to do on the top half of that wall, we're going to do an earthen plaster. It doesn't need to be so protected from the rain up above. Plus, we also want it to breathe, and that's the beauty of the earthen plasters, is that although they're not weatherproof, they do allow breathability. They'll absorb moisture when it's damp, and they'll release it when it's dry. But they're way better than cement plaster, because the cement plaster will actually trap humidity inside it after the rainy season, and that will encourage rot of the wood inside. So the earth is perfect for keeping the breathability of that wall it'll keep it as dry as it can be, given the outer climate conditions. It stops the rot. So all that earth will seal it off from all the bugs and microbes and fungi and woodworm that could get in, and also prevents it from getting too damp inside. And speaking of bugs, there's something crawling up me there. A firefly. Oh, released into the wind. Kamikaze. So we're going to have a dry, a breathable plaster up above, and a waterproof, water-resistant lime and prickly pear cactus down below. So we've got the breathability, but we've got the rain protection. So it's a very sophisticated earthen plaster wall, this. And now we're going to, I think we're ready for the demonstration. Sí, se puede añadir. It's going to mix the water in with this lime. This burns nastily at this point, and also it's caustic afterwards, so you can get very nasty burns from this.
What burn?
Lime burns, or it's an alkali. It's a very strong alkali.
So that liquid right there.
What it will become, the actual white stuff is what burns you. Now we're going to add water, and it still
But
will
just
burn
touching the lime plant will burn you.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, well, I mean, if it stays on you. It needs to stay on you for a little while, but yeah. So if you're ever working with this, I recommend using plastic gloves. They've been working with it all their lives, so they know how to avoid it. It's not as much fun in small quantities. When you do this in a large quantity, you put about 3 bags of the stuff, and the whole thing goes up. And you can sometimes see if people haven't left this enough time, you get these little chunks in it, and they will absorb water from the atmosphere and then pop off, and you see little holes in the lime wall from where they haven't left their lime enough time.
You have to leave it enough time, just like in the water, or?
Yeah, it reacts with the water. This is very disappointing bunch of lime. I'm going to go and see if we've got some other stuff in the bag of lime that'll be a bit more dramatic. This is not very pure lime. You get lime of different purity, and see that the whiter it is, the purer it is. And the actual impure lime is very desirable for some plasters. It's a bit more reactive as well. Still cold. Here we can hear it fizzing now. So if you do get it on, you can just wash it off with water.
Do the smoke?
Can you hear it?
Oh, now I can hear it. Oh, I see a little steam.
Yeah, it's starting.
Yeah, you can see.
If you do it in larger batches, it is a lot more dramatic. I've never tried it in a small batch before. Just remember to make sure we do a whole lot next time.
Yeah, you can see it.
And that it gives off clouds of vapours. My son loves it when I do it. A big batch. We do it exactly the same way, just in a very large batch. So
Do you use a different tool than a trowel to break it up?
we don't break it up actually, you just add the water.
Oh, it breaks
and you
itself.
use one of the hose and mix it like that. So,
Okay.
They do break it up a bit actually, yeah. But it's as long as it's left long enough with the water, it will break up, or it absorbs it and reacts and breaks apart.
Okay.
And they actually sell lime slurry in buckets in the States. It's liquid with a certain amount of it sealed and it's already prepared in the factory. This is raw lime straight from the kiln, and they sell it. They actually sell it like this because they use it for making tortillas. So you'll always find lime in Guatemala. What they'll actually do is leave the corn seed, what are they called? Kernels, soaking with lime overnight, and it breaks it down. It's very hard. They use it dried. It breaks down the corn kernels, and then they'll take it up to the mill the next day, pour off the water, and then just put the corn in, and they grind it up, and out it comes.
Yeah, they don't actually throw in like oil or anything, do they? It's just the lime, right?
Just the lime, yeah. So here you can see how it's breaking apart of its own. It's absorbing the water, and you can feel. You can bring your hand up and feel the heat.
It's cool. It's got all this like smoke coming off it. Reaction is.
Yeah, it's just CaO plus H2O goes to CaO2H2, I think, or Ca2OH. Or just CaOH.
No, I think it's CaOH.
CaOH2,
yeah.
Right. That was a bit more dramatic. What we're actually going to do with this small pile is we're actually just going to chuck it in there as well. It'll help the mix that we're going to be plastering with. It's such a small amount. See. So while that reacts, we can do the prickly pear cactus. And this is great stuff because it's so cheap and it grows everywhere. Just about. I can do that demo. So this is a prickly pear, and this is covered in little spines. So be careful; don't touch this with your bare hands. And although he didn't hesitate to, and you basically want to chop it up into chunks. So just like, It's Greek salad style. So if you're cooking it, make sure you take out the spines first. With this, we don't have to because some people do, but the way we're going to do it is we're going to sift it at the end of its fermentation, and that takes all the little spines out. Just dump it in a place that's thinner. That's it. The sap, the liquid.
Ajá.
¿Para qué sirve?
Cualquier herida, si te abre acá, hay que echar.
Oh, it's like aloe vera. It'll seal it. It's like a glue. Yeah. Oh, I did not know that.
Sí, es una medicina.
Ajá. Como igual que el banano. Y se puede comer también. Another good one for wounds, if you're ever in a tropical zone, actually, is the banana. You actually take a young, there's one over there. Just take a young banana, chop its stalk near the top, and a juice comes out of it. It's
Sí,
brilliant antiseptic and wound cleaner.
So you just take a green banana?
No, the banana plant. The
Oh,
stalk.
okay.
And you put it, I actually had a cut that was right the way down to my thumb. I was splitting bamboo and the knife cut right through there. And it was a centimetre long with the banana juice. Just poured it on for about 5 minutes, and you can see there's no scar at all. Wow. So it's amazing.
Ella puede echar líquido de banana.
We need somebody to be chopping this up in a minute, and we're going to fill this bucket with it.
I got you.
Oh.
Okay.
Always get the machete.
Machete. Put the Rambo knife.
Those people got to go from nature.
So,
I bought a pair of shorts and a sweater in the same place. Hey, Michael?
Yeah.
I get that line.
well, we've got a lot more of this prickly pear over there in a bag. What we need to do is we're going to fill this with prickly pear, and then you add water to it, so it's about an inch above the prickly pear. And you just leave it for a week. Ustedes normalmente lo tapan o lo dejan al aire. Para tapar este después, al aire. Sí, yeah, just open air. And then it'll ferment, and it becomes this like transparent goo. And that's pretty much it. Oh wow, that looks great. See, yeah, wow. See, put a little bit too much water in that one. But you can just add sand and molcal to soak that up. This is more just to demonstrate the technique. You'll just do it the same way, just in a much bigger pile. You don't get so much water leaking off.
And that's what you put the final coat on with? Or do you mix it with this?
That's not necessarily the final coat. That can be a rough coat, and then you can put a final coat on after that. And then you can also paint it with a lime wash. You actually make paint out of lime as well. You just mix it with water and a bit of prickly pear, and paint that on. And you can make earthen paints the same way. Just add a bit more earth and a bit of lime, and it makes it different shades from dark brown to light brown.
What's the percentage of the earthen leaf, the lime?
Good question.
50-50.
I usually do, for each bag of lime, I do 6 bags of sand. Would be quite a weak mix. You want to make it a bit stronger, about 4 bags. So it's between 4 to 1 and 6 to 1.
And how much water?
And as much water as it takes to absorb. Yeah. Sand and a 1/4 part prickly pear juice. Prickly pear juice, horse manure. And that mix, you then put that on over this coat. Again, you wet it with a sponge so that it exposes the sand, and you apply the clay plaster over that. And you can also stick fun stuff in that, like I don't know, found objects, bits of old tiles, rocks, crystals. Mica is a good one. It sort of gives it a sparkly finish, or any old thing that you want to put in. And to that mix, you can add a little bit of lime to lighten it, so if you want to play with the colour. And that's your earth plaster and your lime plasters, or earth render and lime render. And yeah, any questions on those?
So on this now, you're gonna soak this just in water?
Yeah, we just, it doesn't say, it's actually, it's fermentation process. It will actually ferment.
In like a week?
In a week, it takes a week, yeah.
So then you just strain it or something, or?
Yeah, then you strain it. You just, what they do is they put a big bag of, a big sheet of plastic or steel 2 mil mesh, wire mesh or plastic mesh, and then just lift it out of it and hold it and squeeze it, and all the debris gets chucked
does
inside.
that kind of smoosh these a little bit, or, I mean,
Yeah,
you're not gonna like
after
a stove or something.
after a week that'll all turn to mush, and there's a little bit of debris from the skin, but not much. And what you're after is the sort of transparent goo.
Yeah.
You can also just drain it through a sifter, like one of those boxes we had. Just pour it through that little by little and push it through. And something else, I mean, I really highly recommend experimenting with earthen plasters. Everyone's so used to seeing these cement plasters on their walls that we've kind of got used to that and think that's normal. In fact, you know, it's only in the last couple of 100 years that we've had that and been using cement at all. And in fact, it's a lot healthier for your health in the internal environment, the humidity and living spaces, to be using earth plasters. And a lot of people are coming onto that, and more people are plastering their own homes. You can also do an earthen floor, which is about a 5-inch thick job, and it's quite a lot of work, and you have to find out what earth is good in your area and find out what local people are doing. But in the States especially, there's a lot of people who are getting into this and realizing its value and appeal, and you know, its aesthetic value as well. So moving away from modernism more to some traditional earthen style of architecture. You can make floors so they're rock solid and you can't damage them. Oh, you can damage them, you take a chisel to them, but very, very hard. You can mop them by sealing them with linseed oil. Remember the restaurant we went to, the Cobb restaurant? That was all sealed with linseed oil. And you can actually mop an earthen floor with linseed oil. And you can actually see the fibres in the floor of these earthen floors. And I know, personally I find it beautiful, and I'm looking forward to doing more plaster, more earthen plasters inside houses as well.
Do you need to reapply your linseed oil?
Yeah, they do need periodic repair, and I mean that was part in New Mexico where they have a lot of adobe houses. Sorry, I'll just turn this off. In New Mexico, it was a yearly tradition. It was very much the women who would do that. It was their job, and they took great pride in it. And they would get to, and also sometimes it was the community. They would actually repair the houses. There was very little rain there, so they had a lot of outdoor adobe, but a little bit would get damaged each year, and they'd go back and apply the plasters, and it would be good for the next year or two. And that yearly maintenance, we're so used to building to last forever nowadays, we forget that in fact here too they used to have earthen floors. They used to sprinkle water on it every morning, and then they'd sweep it and then sprinkle water on it, and that would keep the dust down and keep it solid. And if they saw an area where it was getting particularly worn, they'd actually seal that. And in fact, and I know in New Mexico, gradually the level of the floor would go down and down and down and down and down and down and down into the soil, and that was helpful. I remember the exact science of it, but it would help with the cold winters and the warm summers in different ways. To actually have a lowered floor prevented the draft that you'd often get with a normal, a floor like this. You lose a lot of heat there, but because the floor was lower, you didn't get the same heat loss that you would in conventional raised floor buildings. Again, that was for a dry climate, so it really depends on the climate you're in. So does the earth mixes that you use in your adobe walls or your bajareke walls. The earth is different wherever you are, so you need to experiment. And so if you look for a recipe online, you won't find one. All the experts say you cannot get a recipe unless you get pre-mixed adobe products, which you can get, but they're very expensive. It's a lot cheaper to find out where your local earth deposits are and play around mixing, adding clay or adding sand, see as you go. So you become more in tune with the local ecology of the place as well by doing that. You have to go hunting around. These last couple of weeks I've been running up and down these mountains looking for all the right clays and things to get this course ready. And in the end we ended up using old adobe bricks because it was taking so much time. I wasn't going to be ready. I wasn't able to get the clay, all the clay that we needed to mix with all the earth. I was able to sift all that. So it is quite labour intensive, but again, that's healthy too. Getting back to using our hands to build with goes against all we've been learning in the West, towards using technology to speed everything up. This actually forces us to slow down, get our hands dirty, and it's healthy for us too. I'm sure you've all been sleeping better this week.
Yes.
So mixing the mud. So I've become more and more in love with this stuff, and I'm going to keep on experimenting and learning. I'm going to start publishing my experience. I've already started publishing my experiences online in my blog. And, I encourage you to, if you ever have the great opportunity to build your own houses or to build for other people, recommend this to them or try using it yourself.
Would it work in our climate?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what did people do before cement? They used earthen plasters and lime plasters, and people still use lime plasters a lot. It's really the earthen plasters that is a skill and tradition that has been greatly lost. But it's actually a lot healthier than cement. I think I much prefer how it ends up looking. Look at Il Giardino on the way up here, up this path. There's some lovely natural plaster work there. And I'm looking forward to there being more in San Marcos. It's something that, although there's been a lot of natural building here, there hasn't been much natural plaster work yet. It's something that people are only beginning to discover. What they'll tend to do with their adobe homes, they'll tend to just wash it with a sponge, and that just by washing the adobe wall, you actually get a natural plaster finish. That's a really quick, cheap version of it, but it's not quite as beautiful as an applied earthen plaster. Any more questions about plasters? If you do get into it, there's a ton of resources online, and you'll be able to find experts in your area who can make recommendations. So do that if you ever do. I wanted to show you a couple of other things we've been doing that people may have been wondering about. We've been chopping up the pine needles.
All the small things. Let me.
I gotta look busy.
The next adobe mix that we're going to be making for this wall over here is we're going to be using this earth. We're going to be putting that in there. We're also going to be adding more sugar. He says it wasn't sticky enough and it wasn't fibrous enough, so we're going to be adding these pine needles to this mix. We're going to be doing a different style of mud building there.
What's the reason for the difference? What is different about them?
Really, it was about both Juan and Ventura recommended different things. I've worked with this before, and Ventura said it wasn't necessary. It was stable enough and sturdy enough. It didn't need it. So I was like, okay, well, I want, whenever I work with people, I encourage them to own their project. So, and he was going to be the main guy doing it. So we just did it his way.
Okay.
And that's the other thing. Even in one area, there are a million different techniques, and we're learning them. You can also use chopped straw. It's very popular in the States. So if you can't get pine needles, they use them a lot in Guatemala for decorating churches. So they're always collecting them. They've always got big bags of them hanging around. So it's a very easy to get material. But they also use local grasses here. So any local grass that's quite tough, like straw, just chop it up and put it in your mix, and that provides the fibre. So that's basically what you've got. You've got your binder, which is your glue-like material, which is your clay or your lime or your prickly pear. You've got your aggregate, which is like sand, and that's what gives it the structure. And you've got your binder, your aggregate, and then you've also got your fibres. And you don't have to have the fibres, but the fibres really prevent it from cracking. And often if you do an earthen plaster, you'll find that it will crack. So you can either fix it with a sponge and water, or just get a little bit of more, just keep a bit on the side. wet it again, and smear it in to fill the cracks, and that should fix it. One other thing I wanted to show you was the maguey. Those are the strips that we cut up the other day. Remember how big they were? And look how small they are. They've been dried out in the sun. They've been sitting on top of this roof for, 4 days now. And they're ready now to use for tying the bamboo onto the posts. So the way they do that is they dump that all in a bucket, and then they just pull it out of the bucket and tie it.
Like if you try and do a square knot with an uneven piece, like this one's very large and the other
Oh,
one's small.
right.
The smaller one just tends to just slip through.
Huh.
So you really have to make sure it's tight before you.
And what are you doing, Karen?
I am twisting the maguey, so taking strands of maguey and rolling them and twisting them so the fibers kind of stick together.
Okay.
And then we go on to the next step, which is
Tying them together.
tying 2 of them together.
Making
then-
longer pieces.
Yeah, into longer pieces, and then we'll use those to tie onto the bamboo.
Cool.
Where'd you dump it, Tim? Just right over the wall?
And I've been told different things. Some people say they're just as good as each other. Others are telling me that the one with the outer coating is more durable and will last longer. But I know of houses that have been built with that have lasted 50 years, so I don't think there's any great concern about using the other one, which is the one that we did on that wall. And to thank you all very, very much for doing this on your holiday and actually volunteering and coming and making this all possible. I understand a lot of you fundraise for this, which has made it possible for me to be here in Ventura. Shep is just here anyway, he's just been helping out with the goodness of his own heart. But all these materials were made possible to build this for the school thanks to your fundraising efforts and desire to be here. So thank you very much indeed, and on behalf of them too and on behalf of the school, thank you very much for your help in making this possible.